Welcome back to our podcast, Voices Strong, El Paso. Today is September 29th, 2019, and our mission is to encourage and foster positive connections in our community while revealing unity and strength in our differences. One discussion, one meal, one mind at a time. My name is Ceci Monares, and today's podcast is focusing on our special guests who will discuss how they reacted to the mass shooting in El Paso on August 3rd, 2019. And we will also cover the history of Pan Dulce and the El Paso border culture. I'd like to have everyone take a moment to introduce themselves and tell us a little about what you do. Let's go ahead and start with our special guest.
Hi, my name is Denise Heard-Bashur. By day, I'm a photo editor, and by night, I am a blogger, social media addict, and very proactive in politics and social issues, and as well as a single mom.
Hello, my name is Kara Baker. I am a librarian here in one of the El Paso high schools. As I was told recently by a person I was working with, librarians represent all things good and knowledgeable, so I am here to represent all things good and knowledgeable.
Okay, next. There we go.
Hi, good morning. This is Claudia Castañeda. I'm happy to be here again and having our guests here. Yeah.
My name is Candace Prince, and I'm a local art teacher and artist.
My name's Jean Laura Padilla. I'm a local homeschool mom, and I just dabble in a lot of different crafts.
Okay, and I'm George Padilla. Okay. I'm a teacher, photographer, videographer, writer, whatever. So I dabble in also dabble in a lot of stuff. I do want to note that as we're recording, I said again. Okay, I apologize to the audience, ladies and gentlemen, if I say a lot, especially to Claudia's friend. If you're out there listening, this goes out to you. I'll give you a long one, and then from here on out, I'm going to try to mentally keep the uhs to a minimum. So, and also, please, we apologize. Don't mind some of the noises you hear in the background because those are the microphones moving around. We are at a big table and the microphones are sitting on the table, so we don't have any kind of fancy microphone stands or anything like that. So please bear with the technicalities of recording a podcast. And any little noise you hear in the background, just please picture yourself here with us having the discussion. And we do have our guests today. We have two guests, and they just introduced themselves. And we wanted to discuss with you your reaction after the August 3rd shooting and your beyond reaction to that August 3rd shooting. So you had your initial thoughts and reaction, and you are going to be proactive in our discussion before, and I want you to shed light on that. First, kind of describe your experience and why and how you're gonna continue, your after reaction, I guess you can say, and being proactive.
Okay, so when the event actually happened, I was asleep. I work on the west side, and so most of my coworkers are on the west side. And so the minute they hear something happening on the east side, they immediately think of me, and we have a group chat. And what woke me up was the group chat just going off on and on. And, I'm thinking, what is happening? So I looked, I got the alert that everyone got on their phones, I think. And I replied right away. I wanted them to know I was okay without having to worry. And then I'm trying to kind of get my bearings and thinking about my teenage daughter who often goes to the mall on Saturday mornings, and remembering she's also in bed, thank God. My younger daughter was with my mother-in-law. So once I knew everyone was safe, then it's making sure everyone else is okay and just keeping up with the news. When I got back I was thankful that I did not know anyone who was a victim that day. And so I think with that there's almost a guilt, I think, involved in that, and that, you weren't directly affected. I mean, I live 2 miles away from where it happened. I grew up in the Eastwood community. My kids go to the schools in the Eastwood community. And, we frequent the mall all the time. In fact, we were going to go to Macy's that day.
And just to clarify, Eastwood is the school community.
Right.
Eastwood High School, Eastwood Middle School.
Right. And made most famous by the Plano Eastwood High School game.
Right.
That was really kind of bridged the two communities.
Yes.
But so it really happened in our backyard, and I think because we didn't know anyone that had been victimized directly, again, there's a kind of guilt in there, because you're feeling the impact of it, but do you have a right to, as much as someone who was there? And it reminded me of 9/11. And I was up in Seattle when 9/11 happened. And I was it's almost a similar situation, because the report that came out after 9/11 was that Seattle was originally one of these cities that was going to be targeted. And the building that they wanted to target was about 2 blocks away from my apartment. So it was like I was almost a part of it, but not quite, so you I think a lot of El Pasoans, there's between, if you want to, how technical you want to get, there's, 700,000 to, a couple million in this area. So most of us, I think, are going through that, where it's like, how much of this do I get to own? And the answer to that is, do you own as much of it as you want, basically? And I think when I went back to work the next day, I'm worrying, who is going to be there? Because it's a very large company. And I was worried, did we all make it back? Because they didn't know everyone who had been killed yet. And thankfully, everyone did make it back in our company. And, a lot of people were stressing about the day-to-day work things. And I'm thinking, let's prioritize, how can this be your priority right now? And so that's kind of where I started to get a feeling I needed to do something. I needed to act on, because it was starting to look really bleak. El Paso was not safe. I mean, we all kind of know that we're not, but we kind of feel like we are, because we're kind of by ourselves. The nearest cities are a few hundred miles away. So when it did happen, it was really quite shocking, like we're used to people not even knowing we're here, let alone coming directly to attack us. And I'm
glad you bring that up, because there is a sense of isolation with El Paso and Juarez. And Juarez is a little bit distant away from some of their larger cities like Chihuahua and all that. So we're in it together, El Paso, Juarez area. So you really feel that distance. And you said the nearest city is, so many miles away. I mean, the closest city to us, and it's smaller than us, is Las Cruces, New Mexico.
Much smaller.
Yeah, 40 miles away. And that's it for quite a while.
I know.
Quite a distance.
And truthfully, I mean, Juarez would be our closest city.
Right.
And which is why, and I always kind of pictured us all on a raft together out in this vast ocean. I mean, that's kind of where we are. And so kind of strange when the hurricane kind of finds us. And now El Paso is square on the map, and so much focus is on El Paso. So much focus is on, we had already kind of experienced it with the whole border wall issue when Trump came with his rally here earlier this year. But this really, nailed it. And I kind of miss the days when we were, not so obvious and, people didn't really know where El Paso was.
Right.
But what I love is that El Paso has really kind of taken that focus and said, okay, fine, you're going to pay attention to us. Well, this is how cool we are, rather than, trying to shy away from it. But that was really, I really wanted to kind of carry that on, that's pretty admirable.
So, Saturday morning, I was woken up with a message from one of my girlfriends on Messenger because she was dating somebody who worked for the sheriff's dispatch. And he had told her that things were going down. And again, all of the confusion that I've heard you guys speak about, was it at the mall? Was it at Walmart? Was it at the Sam?
Yeah, tons of confusion that day. Misinformation as well. Just people heard something and they ran with that.
Right. And then, I work in Horizon. I live in the far east side of El Paso, but like Denise, I grew up in the Eastwood area as well. So that's still my home. That's still my neighborhood. And I also, just started talking to people and texting people. And I am so anti-social media. It's like my digital footprint is like 2 steps, y'all. I mean, it's nothing. So
it's polar opposites. She's deep in it, and then you're
truly. And so this made me kind of break my silence on Facebook, because I had so many people from all over the country who were texting me and asking me if I was okay. I had a cousin who was visiting Spain at the time. She woke up at like 4 o'clock in the morning Spain time to ask if I was okay. And so to avoid all of that, I went on to Facebook and learned how to do the I'm okay post that they had.
Marked safe, yes.
Right, the marked safe, which I didn't even know was a thing, because I turned my back on Facebook a long time ago. But it was a little eye-opening to me that platform was a way that people were tracking each other and were sharing stories and were helping each other kind of cope through this terrible tragedy that we really didn't know how to deal with. And to me, the thing about our mass shooting here was the amount of time that it took for all of the information to be disseminated and sorted through, because I started watching this probably about 9:30 in the morning was when I think everything kind of started, and still didn't understand really everything that had happened until probably the next day. And I know that Candy talked about having her principal reach out and make sure everybody on her campus was okay. And my principal, we have a Remind app, and my principal reached out and made sure we were okay. And then our individual supervisors said, okay, I haven't heard from this person. They're in your department. Please contact them. Please let us know that they're okay. So the way we came together and the way we started keeping tabs on people was just remarkable to me.
It was.
And then the fact that so many people, instead of hiding in their homes or living in fear or avoiding the area, were going to the reunification site, and we're bringing water and food and comfort to these people, because that is who we are as El Pasoans, right? That is who we are, is to be there to reach out to people. And I think that that's one thing that people don't really understand about who we are as a culture, is we are the friendliest people you will ever meet. I am not afraid to walk down the street in the middle of the night and say hello to the person coming towards me. That's not a concern I have. Would I do that in Georgia? No. Would I do that in Dallas? Probably not. Even in Seattle, there's a wariness that is in these other cities that El Paso just, I don't think, has. And for me, what all of this really represents in thinking about this human coming into our community and hurting us so deeply through his own ignorance tells me that there needs to be a paradigm shift about who El Paso is. The media is out there representing who we are without our own voices, without listening to who we are. And they're projecting that to the rest of the world, as we're seeing, and it's having grave consequences.
It is, and it's future potential threat again. I mean, if that's who's representing us, that's unfair. And you said it correctly, is that without our permission or without our input in that. We had media come in right afterwards, and a few of them got it. I think they had, and they got it after being in it, and people reaching out to them. I think it was
that Rolling Stone article.
Yes, the Rolling Stone article.
Rolling Stone, fantastic.
That was
and you
beautiful.
could tell they hung out with our people.
Yeah. Okay, I don't know about that. Fill me in.
You want a kind of a better representation of...
Do you remember her name? More?
I really don't remember her name, and I wish I didn't.
So Rolling Stone sent a reporter here to talk through the tragedy. And she really sat down and spent time with a bunch of individual people. She went to the memorial site. She went to the Hooters that was there and talked to the owner. And she was just gathering stories to tell the stories about who we are culturally and how, unfortunately, mass shootings are not her name was Rachel Williams. And in the title of the article is El Paso is Already Great, which amazing.
Nice.
Yeah,
But mass shootings, unfortunately, are a reality in our world. And they're happening over and over and over again. But again, I think not only what makes our tragedy so unique is not that it happened, but the way our community responded to it. And I feel like Ms. Williams gave a good voice to how our community responded to it, talking about how the owner of Hooters, which is in that exact same vicinity where the movie theater, mall, Walmart, Sam's Club is, shut down his business and just started harboring people, and then started just serving drinks and food and helping in any small manner that he could in that way. And then when the memorial started to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow, he also just became kind of a refuge point for people to take a break from all of that outside, get something to drink, use the bathroom, wash their face, dry their eyes, and then go back out there and start doing it again.
Okay.
I also think a lot of people don't realize how hot it was. It was well over 100 degrees when this happened.
Yeah, if you're not from El Paso, we are known for a very hot summer for sure. And I think sometimes we have winter. It might be like a couple of days we'll get a winter thrown in there, but
And there's no real shade out there either. And it's all
in
concrete.
that area, it's all parking lot. It's all parking lot and buildings, shopping center, that kind of thing. But there is absolutely zero shade. I think there's a Red Lobster nearby that might have shade. There's some oleanders over there or something. But
Right.
our temperatures are usually 100 degrees. Almost every day we're in the high 90s, or if not, we'll reach over 100. And you're right, that memorial, people flocked there.
Oh, yeah.
They needed to react. They needed something. They needed an outlet to react because it was still disbelief. I know everybody says it that you never think it's going to happen in your town and all that, but here, and you know what you know of the people here, and Candy brought this up before, it had to be, the horrificness of it had to be visited upon us. It was not from within. Yeah. And that was so hard to believe. It was just a state of disbelief is what it was. And when everybody flocked to that area, and you talk about in the article where she talked to the owner of Hooters and letting just the bathroom alone. And you said to recompose yourself a little bit and wash your eyes and cool off. And I know he gave out a lot of drinks because it's just really hot out there, and people still went to this makeshift memorial. It says
everything.
It says everything about us. And if you went there, everybody that you get a taste, you got a taste of El Paso if the media was hanging around right there, because everybody went there. If you met all those people, you met El Paso. Because even people from Juarez were going to that makeshift memorial.
I think it's interesting that you're talking about that the reaction to what happened is the uniqueness in it. And so what I was going to say is you guys had a reaction. And so how did you two come together, and what has become of this?
Let me give you a little history of Kara and Denise.
Not too much.
We've known each other since high school. And we were friends in high school, but we weren't really best friends in high school. We were kind of proximity friends in high school.
We had a mutual friend.
And I left for college. I went to Portales, New Mexico, in the middle of nowhere, New Mexico, and learned a lot about myself, mostly that I was an abject failure at college. Like
at that
horrible.
time.
At that time.
She got better later.
I did. Okay. I came back to El Paso after a year and a half of just ridiculous wasting time and learning that I didn't know how to learn. And, and so when I came back to El Paso, all of my friend base and everybody that I had really known before and had hung out with had all gone to their respective colleges or had moved on away from where I was at that point in my life.
But I was still here.
And Denise was still here.
I was a year behind her, so in my defense.
And she became just such a solidifying point in my life that really helped me crawl out of this horrible depression that I was suffering and this change of life. I mean, it was literally a metamorphosis for me, having to relearn who I was and getting to know what I was good at and what skill set I had. And so ever since then, I feel like we've just kind of BFF'd it up. And
we met when I was a freshman in high school. It was very beginning freshman year. So I've known her for almost a few decades. We won't get into how long that was.
2 years.
Like 10 years. We only graduated 10 years ago. I wish. But she, again, we were friendly enough in high school that, hey, what's up? But we didn't, I guess, hang out, right. I guess what you would say, until after high school and after she had come back. We still had a lot of the same friends. So I think that that's how we reconnected, and our relationship has always been very easy. I don't think we've ever had a fight, have we?
Really?
In like 30 years, no fight. Oh, I just gave it the year away. But
I don't know how old you are.
What's interesting is she knew my ex-husband in high school. We all were in the same school, and so she has really been a part of that with me. She was my maid of honor. She was there the day my first baby was born, and she was there through my divorce. I was her maid of honor. I mean, so we really just trudged through life, and we don't get to see each other all that often. We're extremely busy people, and she had to move way out there, far east El Paso. So, but that's fine with us. We have that relationship that doesn't need to reinforce itself over and over and over. And we're usually on the same page. So we often try to go out of town together, and those long road trips are a really great time for us to reconnect. And we used to have the idea of doing a podcast on the road, because we have the greatest conversations on the road. But it's kind of like, how are we going to mold this? How are we going to focus this to the point where people will actually want to listen to our stupid stories? And I mean, we're pretty funny. We're pretty smart, I think. But I don't know if we're a niche interest or if we'd be kind of general. Who can say? But so I think the idea of doing a podcast has always been with us. And now with this event,
it became kind of a galvanizing moment for us.
And I think that because we see so eye to eye on so many things, almost, I would say like 98% of our views are really in line with each other. We kind of came up with it at the same time. But we were trying to kind of mold where we wanted it to go, because you can just say, oh, I want to do a podcast, but you don't, you really got to find who
direction.
Who your audience is going to be,
right.
What you're,
Yeah, we know about that.
You know about that. So, and that's kind of where we were at with this. And I think we've pretty much kind of figured out where. That didn't make sense, did it? Pretty much kind of figured out where we're going to head with this.
Process.
We really are. We're brainstorming it. But the point, I think, is that we really are going to do this. We want to do this, and we really want to expose, the beauty of El Paso, and maybe in a very unique way. We haven't really settled on that yet, but again, I think that the strength of our friendship is really kind of indicative of what happens here in El Paso, too. So many people here were born and raised and stayed here or came back here. I mean, El Paso is kind of a boomerang city. And
that's a common story.
It is. Yeah. How many people do you know? I'm going to go off to college and I'm back. And I've moved away twice and I've come back. And now I'm raising my daughters here. And
why is that? Did you come back?
Oh, to be honest, money. Seattle is very expensive.
But El Paso
I came back
reasonable.
a failure. She came back a mom.
I did. I moved back. I moved cross country 8.5 months pregnant, and it really did a number on me. But it was a money issue, because my ex-husband and I was 25 years old. I mean, and I think about that now, and I'm like, that's so young, for to be starting a life. And no wonder, we ended up divorced. And we're just, I actually still
nobody saw it coming.
Nobody saw it coming.
So based on where you've been and coming back to El Paso, I mean, do you feel like El Paso is a good place to raise your child?
I really do. I loved Seattle. I miss it desperately. People hear me talk about it ad nauseum, but we decided, because my ex-husband is also from here, he went to Eastwood along with Kara and me, we wanted to raise our daughter around family. And, his family's still here. My family's still here. And even though we're divorced, we're still very close. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I've gone on trips with my mother-in-law post-divorce, So I always thought that was interesting. My ex-husband could go to work and say, oh, my mom and my ex-wife are on vacation together. But again, I mean, these are the strong familial bonds that we form out here. And I think part of our isolation factors into that. But El Paso is always a touchstone for people that were born here or spent significant time here, I think.
Is that what the focus of your podcast will be on?
It could be. I mean,
What we've really talked about mostly, and this is where Claudia and I were talking about it, is we want to correct this inaccuracy about who El Paso is. And so our idea is that more than anything, we want to give voice to those stories. As a librarian, clearly I collect books and, stories, and I'm also a storyteller kind of innately. And I think that it's very important that we show the variety of who El Paso is and the beauty of our culture and everything that makes us who we are, because those assumptions or those stories that the media is portraying about us are wrong and are now proving to be dangerous to us.
Yeah, and I had that goes along with what I brought up before, that we were in the limelight in the country. Beto O'Rourke did, bring some of that attention, but we were the wall. And then we were now the shooting. So we were those two defined by that.
And the immigrant detention center.
Right. The detention centers. And that was the image of El Paso. And that's part of what our group, the incident brought us together. Again, we were always in contact with each other, social media, of course. But even more so than on that day, August 3rd, we all contacted each other on a group chat. The power of social media that day was just amazing.
Yeah.
You said that yourself. And we came together. We wanted a reaction. We had our initial reaction. We were in shock. We made sure everybody was safe. But we wanted to go beyond that. And very similar motivation behind our project and your project. And that's to bring El Paso to life, the real El Paso, not the one that some of the media outlets would portray. And like that Rolling Stone article, she got it right. There was another, and I forgot his name. I don't have cable news, but that's how I get these clips on social media. I mean, I don't have cable TV. And there was it might have been CNN. I don't remember who it was, but they were kind of pleading. Said, look, these are the real people. And you can tell the way he was speaking of that, okay, El Pasoans got to him. They got to sit down and talk with him, or he talked with them, and they gave a better image of who we are than and so much more than a wall, a detention center, and a shooting. And that's what we want to do was bring light to who we really are. And I said it before, I'll say it again. There was just so much more positive coming out of that day than that horrific mass shooting.
I think it's really cool. There was one day my coworkers and I were going to go to lunch, and somebody asked me, I don't know if it was me directly or just in general in the car, what was the name of the shooter? And we were like, I said, I can't remember.
I love that we can't remember.
I
That's
do
good.
now.
I love that.
If I don't turn on my phone right now,
don't give credence to the victimizer and tell the voices of the victims.
In all honesty, do any of you remember his name?
I do now.
I don't.
Andrew something?
Patrick Curtius.
Patrick. Oh, okay.
Oh my God, I did.
But I had to have somebody remind me of it, and
Nothing.
I really loved that, because that, I think, has been, especially, like the March for Our Lives kids have brought this up, that the shooter is the one that ends up getting all the press, if you will, when a shooting happens. And instead, this is the first time that I can think of where the story of the shooting isn't just the horror. It's not even so much the shooter. It's the community coming together afterwards.
Exactly.
And how it's impacting a very, what's the word I could use for this one? Turning point seems like such an understatement, of a presidential race that's coming up. You know, I mean, the effect on politics right now of our shooting, it's almost like a perfect storm brewing, where you're getting all these ingredients that are kind of coming together, because I really feel like our country is at a head. It's got to give somehow. And I really think this is something that has really pushed it beyond, the same old, politics that gets hashed out. And really, and like you brought up Beto O'Rourke, he's kind of out there by himself doing, trying to expose El Paso for what it is. And he's talked extensively about how our strength is in our mixture of cultures. And I think part of my motivation for wanting to, get online and get on a podcast and everything is to help him out. one voice says one thing, but if you get a bunch of voices doing it, people start to listen.
Right. And I mean, kudos to him. I mean,
Yeah, definitely.
Running for the Texas seat just brought a lot of light to El Paso.
It's very true.
Just that one race because of where he's from and how much he spoke of El Paso during that race.
Yeah.
He was trying to represent the entire state, but he kept bringing up El Paso quite a bit. And I mean, I have initial reactions. I have knee-jerk reactions, and I know a lot of people on social media. Their reactions were, "Well, I thought El Paso was the safest city in the country at the day of the shooting." That morning, they were already chiming in with comments like that. And later on, we learned it was not us. It's somebody 12 hours away that did this, not from here.
And we lost 20 some odd people in one day. What did Chicago lose that day?
Right.
Probably about the same.
Louisiana,
Right.
And those are the highest. You brought up Chicago. I think it's New Orleans. They're like a close second.
Exactly.
But we lost more in one day than we ever have in a year.
Truly.
Yeah.
I think that is the most ever in El Paso.
And it had to take someone else, totally different upbringing, totally different geography, to come here and purposely do it. It's not even just a freak accident that did it. Or, and I mean, I hesitate to say that I was grateful to find out he wasn't from here, because I think if I had found out it was an El Pasoan that did it, I would have been like, where the heck are we as a people now?
Right.
You know, what has happened that El Paso has succumbed to this? But it was so...
Yeah.
Again, I was grateful to find out that no, El Paso is still El Paso.
And going back to the social media, and then and you, like I said, polar differences is you're very active in social media, and you just barely started coming back.
I don't know if I'm coming back. I came back for a day.
It's a cesspool.
You're dipping your toes just a little bit. The strange thing about social media is that the power it had that day, but also on the other side, maybe it might have influenced the shooter, to potentially do that. And we have, and you have trolls, and you have, as a father, and my wife is sitting here as parents, and our kids, when they're little, you're supposed to go check under the bed and go look in the closet for the boogeyman. There's nothing you can physically do to protect them from the digital trolls or the digital boogeymen that are out there. They just come out of the shadows, and they can infiltrate our these generations that are growing up with social media. And maybe this guy, maybe he was isolated and he just got influenced, and you had that 4chan and 8chan and all of that kind of stuff. What is, I don't know. And you say, you're almost grateful that it wasn't somebody in El Paso. What's different? And it might be a rhetorical question unless somebody has a theory about it. What's different about El Paso? Why don't I'm sure there's kids out there, and they exist on social media. You're even like a subculture, like the 4chan or 8chan groups, and they have discussions and all of that. But why? I guess what I'm saying is, why would it affect this kid?
In one way.
12 hours away, and we haven't had that kind of incident here with the same with and I call him a kid. He was 18
or 21,
something like that. With our 21-year-old or whoever grew up around the same time he did, and probably access to all that same social media. Mm-hmm. So what is it? The culture around that is the protection, not just parents at home and trying to monitor cell phone and computer and all the social media, but is it culture as a whole? Is it the entire city that is the protection?
I think that what Kara said is that the superpower that she has as a librarian, education, is huge. It doesn't matter where you're at. And so maybe that lack of education is what both podcasts need to be focusing on, so that we don't have just, and we really do need to address the fact that there are echo chambers. It's like, the algorithms within social media that pulls up the search engines that you search for this stuff. So therefore the ads will focus on the things that you search for. And that kind of eliminates us being exposed to the other side's argument when you just hear your your voice being bounced back at you. You're surrounded by people that believe the same thing as you. And I think there's a danger in that. And I think that, you know, to push the whatever the other side is and just be like, we're opposites. I think that we're not identifying that we do have so many similarities, and that the risk in not hearing the other side out and not being aggressive with them leads to things like this. And so I think that your superpower as a librarian and as an educator, and both of you with the passion that you have for what you want to do as well, I think that it's important that the discussion is open but respectful. And I think we should avoid echo chamber.
Well, you bring up educators, librarian. If this kid grew up here, but he had access to his echo chambers, and that's all he had access to, he still would have been exposed to the teachers in this area. And I'm not kidding when I say a lot of teachers treat their students like their own kids.
Oh, true.
Here, even more so. I've heard teachers call their students mija, mijo. That's like saying my child, my little boy, my little girl. And it's very, a lot of the female educators are very, they take on the maternal role in the classroom, because they pick it up from the culture here in El Paso. And it's very much, so if he had that, says like, okay, there is something else other than what I'm in the echo chamber. There is other people out there that are looking at me and saying, come in, and you're going to be, you know, you're going to be loved. And I think if he had grown up here, he would have been a totally different person.
I'd like to share a story.
Sorry, not to interrupt you, but not to say that where he grew up is a bad place.
True.
And I'll be honest, I have not done my homework as to what his upbringing was like, his area, his education, you know, the schooling that he had. Or I'm guilty. I'll say that I have not looked any of that up, so I'm speculating on how he grew up when I make those comments.
He went to Plano High School, which is the school we were talking about. What Eastwood played. Those kids, and I don't mean to really interrupt you. We'll get back to you, I promise. But I just want to say that I was when the Plano School District had first decided to cancel the game, and everyone was kind of in an uproar about it. The football team, the school had raised money for the Paso Victims Fund. And they were going to deliver it to El Paso via Eastwood at their game. And well, I know that the shooter was from Allen, Texas, but I'm assuming Plano's in Plano. Now I sound stupid. Anyway, but they were going to, you know, because Eastwood was going out to Plano to play, and they were going to give it to them. But once this game was canceled, and it was only briefly canceled in the scheme of things, but 8 of the football players were going to drive to El Paso to deliver it in person.
Wow.
And they were all making huge gestures to show solidarity with El Paso. And that really spoke volumes to me. My father's family is from the DFW area. And that was even surprising for me, even knowing the culture out there. And I'm not saying that they're, you know, they're a bunch of jerks out there or anything, but El Paso's different. You know, it's not an El Paso culture. And that area is very big. And in that particular area where this kid grew up is a little higher income. Yeah. And so I think people were surprised by that too, considering, you know, he did all of this. But really, I mean, ignorance doesn't know.
Right.
Doesn't have a price.
You could have a lot of financial resources and still be isolated. Yeah, El Paso, and just to give our listeners maybe some idea, most of our school districts are Title I districts.
No money.
Meaning that a large part of our population is impoverished, right?
And, you know, and that definitely comes from a lot of businesses not wanting to invest in El Paso because they have a misconception about us. And so we kind of come back to the full circle. You know, most of the jobs out here are retail. Really, you know, we keep getting, you know, we're getting a new business in. It's always a call center. It's always a retail. And it's like, we need some big ticket
industry that we create.
Right. For our economy to kind of catch up. But we do well, in spite of all of it. But okay, let's get back to Kara.
Okay. So I want to just talk a little bit about this individual and where I stand in the culture of El Paso. Clearly, we're talking about somebody who is broken. in his mind to have done something so horrible. I have a bit of a macabre fascination about what makes anybody care about anything enough to do such a heinous act. So while in every other shooting I've ever seen or read about, I've been very dismissive of the shooter, probably because it's local and I am searching for those answers to this insanity, I do want to know more about this shooter than I've ever wanted to before. And so I've done a lot of reflecting on who we are as a community, and again, that face that media is portraying for us on our behalf out there. And I think obviously he was young and ignorant and uninformed, but passionate. And that's one thing that I desperately remember about being a young person in that age group, is caring so very deeply about wanting to do something, about change, about our world is burning and we have to put the fire out now, but being powerless in knowing how to do anything to stop it, which I think Denise makes a great point in that our current generation is taking a hold and harnessing that power in a much better way than my generation ever did. So, but as far as our culture goes, I'd like to share a story from early in my teaching career. I had a little girl who never did any work in my class. She was there the entire year. She refused to do anything. The other students didn't talk to her. They didn't like her. They thought she was weird and strange. And her mother came to see me to talk about why she wasn't doing anything in her classroom or in my classroom and why she was failing. And, I was trying to come to some kind of compromise with her to get this girl to do some work so she could pass my class and, have the high school experience she was supposed to have. It happened to be around 9/11 when all of this was going on. And like Denise, I felt a lot of parallels with our El Paso shooting and the powerlessness I felt during 9/11. So to me, the stories correlate, and I hope you guys see it also. But the mother came in with a purse with the Confederate flag on it.
Oh, boy.
Which I didn't think a whole lot of at the time. I was a brand new teacher. It was my first parent-teacher conference. It was a disaster.
As an educator, I feel you on their very first parent-teacher conference.
Trial by fire.
It's never going to go well.
But so we got to a point where our negotiations just broke down. So I asked my supervisor to come in and speak with us to kind of help us mediate this. Fantastic woman who happened to be African American, and the mother would not shake hands with her. And so we failed in communication to the point that we went to our assistant principal, who is a Hispanic woman, and she would not shake hands with her.
Wow.
Shook hands with me when she came into my classroom.
And you're white.
And I'm white.
Kara's very white.
And then we broke down the communication. So we had to move to the principal's office.
Oh, my God.
And while our principal was Hispanic, she has a white name. So she shook hands with her. And that's the moment that I realized, oh my gosh.
What's going on?
This is, and then I saw the purse and like it all clicked for me. And I'm like, oh man. Okay. So I had a real hard time like handling that situation. And it was not graceful on my part, I will admit wholeheartedly. But nothing changed with that little girl except one assignment she did in my class. For Martin Luther King Jr. Day, I had them do a writing prompt talking about a time where they felt discriminated in their life. The only prompt she responded to. And she told me that she understood discrimination better than anyone else because as the only KKK member at our school, she felt ostracized and that people didn't give her respect.
There's the powerless you were talking about.
Wow.
And so I think of her And I think of our shooter here in El Paso, and I see them both as just lost individuals who are so immersed in their own mind and their own viewpoint and their own culture that they can't see the beauty around them. When the mother actually left my office to go home for the evening with her little girl, she told me that she couldn't wait to move back to America, back to South Carolina.
So for that little girl, it began with her upbringing.
Right.
And that's not always obviously the situation with every, mass shooter or whatever. But so I guess we need to identify within our cultures what is prioritized. And so I think that's where we can begin with the podcast, with our own children, with reaching out to people across the country. Just the most we can do is share what we believe in as far as compassion and understanding, and just promote that as much as we can. Yeah. And hopefully it reaches somebody to some degree and they're receptive to it at some point. But if we are not the counterpart to that other negativity, and that is the only thing that they hear, even if we can't slip a little bit in somewhere, then I think that's where we failed, because our voices are not strong. We have to speak up on the other side. We have to be the balance.
Right. And you say the other side. I actually had a conversation with somebody that I know voted opposite of what I would have voted. So,
and when I say the other side, I don't mean like that. I just mean the negative and the positive.
Right. And but I needed to understand a little bit after the shooting with somebody who was pro-gun. And we started discussing. I said, you know what? if the law changed and said you can't have a 30-round magazine, but you can have a 10-round magazine, would you be able to live? And I just flat out asked him. He goes, yeah, I think I can live with that. And then another one, I said, does it have to be a, assault rifle? Does it have to be that M14, AR-15, well, M14 is military.
AK-47?
AK-47 style, He goes,
assault.
And he hadn't thought about it for a little bit. And he was quiet for a little bit. He goes, you know what? Probably not. I guess I wouldn't need something like that. I have my other rifles and.
So you came to a compromise.
So I was just like, holy cow, if we were the government.
Would just sit down.
We just compromised and we made a little deal here and we can move forward.
Well, you're not
it was amazing.
Talking about things with fear, like we're going to take everything away or we're going to do that.
Right.
Like, no, let's just make sure we clarify what this is.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge problem that especially Betho's facing right now. My father, who passed away in 2011, was a huge gun owner. I mean, he liked to hunt. I do not. There's a picture of him teaching me how to use a revolver when I'm 2 years old. And that's culture out there, I mean, he lived way out in the boonies, and he, and they shot stuff all the time. And he had a big locker full of guns, collected knives and stuff. And, he used to also help manage pawn shops in the area and would also deal arms to the local law enforcement. And so obviously very much, pro-gun, but at the same time, I think that if he was alive today and as conservative as he may have been in his views, I really don't see him advocating keeping AK-47s, AR-15s on the street. He was also in the military, was a Vietnam veteran, and I think that he would be alongside with all of us saying, there is too much, because these are guns that create the size of baseballs in people, the size of baseballs, holes the size of baseballs. Let me clarify that. And, to say that you need it for hunting,
it's not necessary.
To me, that kind of defeats the purpose of hunting. Yeah. It's like, it's almost like people who hunt in controlled environments, where they kind of set up these corrals, and so the animals only have so many places to go. Right. It's cheating in my opinion. Exactly.
And there's okay, so Beto, I don't know the percentage of what his vote was. I mean, he clearly took El Paso.
He was within about 2.5% in Texas. So within 250,000 votes.
Yeah. So if you look at his vote count just for El Paso, I want people to think I want people to know there is a ton of gun owners in El Paso. Very pro-gun.
Right.
We have Fort Bliss here. We have a lot of military. I grew up around guns. My uncles, we always used to go to the desert, take me hunting and stuff like. I did not like hunting. I pretend I tried to shoot a rabbit and I miss on purpose. That's just me. But we were always around guns.
It's Texas.
Everybody had guns here in El Paso, and I'm everywhere I went. My uncles, my cousins, just friends, their fathers and their families. It was just that's how it was. Everybody just had guns, and they still do. Gun purchasing here in El Paso is very high, and we don't have. And yet, Beto O'Rourke took El Paso.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think even back in Hillary took El Paso. And here we are, gun culture, voting that way. So there is compromise. There is room for that. Or gun owners, maybe there's a misrepresentation of gun owners out there as gun nuts, but not true gun nuts. You know?
Well, you can be an enthusiast without being insane. You know.
And I'll be honest, I own weapons, so I have 2 rifles at home, and my boys have not. I haven't taken them shooting yet or anything like that. And I learned I was guns. 10. God, I said again. I'm worthless.
It's in your
Our
head.
boys do BB guns and bows and arrows.
Right.
Archery.
But I do have a shotgun and a .22 at home, locked up, of course. But. And I learned very, very young how to use those.
Right.
And there's just I don't know. It's kind of like it is a bad representation of a city, of gun owners, and all of that. So it's if you look at the media, that's not who everybody is. It's what they're bringing. Because my sister, God, right after the thing, like a whole bunch of people signed up for the concealed carry weapon.
Actually, I was going to do it way before.
She's like on Facebook. She's posting me, tagging me. Hey, they have a class. We need to go. And I'm like telling her, I don't feel like I need to. I don't want to lock and load to go buy shampoo at Walmart. And that's just me. But there's people who do carry here in El Paso. There are people who own guns like galore, right? I'm telling you, I know a lot of people that have guns. But they are a very compromising bunch. They're not this image that the media puts out of gun nuts, you know?
I have a question.
I was going to have a question too, but go
Do you
ahead.
think the media tries to pit us against each other?
Oh, definitely. I mean, you got.
Undoubtedly.
I mean, they have to,
Well, they get clicks.
They
They have
need
to make
something
money.
to report on.
Yeah, because nobody wants to hear about things that are good.
Okay, here's
Right.
it's going to be a weird example, but have you ever watched Anchorman 2? Okay, Will Ferrell. It's a hilarious movie. My kind of humor sometimes. I get like really deep movies, like, a very profound thought, and then there's Anchorman 2.
Yeah.
So in Anchorman 2, he gets ratings on the news because he's watching a car chase. The first, and they portrayed it as the first ever car chase broadcasted live on cable news media, 24 hours media.
Yeah.
And everybody tuned off whatever was going on to go to this thing.
Right.
And they even say it because we're going to continue with this and maybe free associate with what we, and then just throwing out, it could be a crazed murderer. It could be this and that. And it turned out to be like an old lady just confused about it, but they got all the rating. So maybe that's what, by pitting us and them, separating us.
Do you think they're
Remember that
aware they're
social
doing
fund?
it? Or
Most
totally.
definitely.
They need, what is it called?
They need ratings.
Ratings, but what is that?
advertisers.
They're making it bigger than what it is.
sensationalizing it.
Sensationalism.
Do you feel like that? Then, I mean, for anybody even listening, me included, like, where do you turn to for truth? Like, how do you know if there's any unbiased?
There's not.
You really
There's inherent
can't.
bias in media, and it's built in to be that way.
And so, who we tune into, is that our echo chamber as well? Again, whether it's Fox News or NPR, or
I think you need to have a variety.
and then make an educated decision based
But
on
that's
your
the
Kind of
beliefs.
find
And
the middle
us-
ground you feel is the truth in there.
You
Yes.
said, how do we guide from here as educators? there's lessons now. I don't know if people know this. If you're not in education, there are lesson plans now distributed, and how to teach students how to go about disinformation, how to decipher all the information out there.
Somebody gave a lesson at one of our things about how to decipher fake news.
Yes.
Fake news, and then
called,
how to
digital
balance
literacy.
Check your sources.
Digital literacy.
Check your sources.
Yes,
Yeah,
check your
definitely.
sources, especially that one.
And I always tell my kids that. I say, identify the problem, cause, solution, and the source, because find out what whoever the source is, they might have an agenda as well.
Indeed. And that's one of the things when I was an English teacher that I worked very hard to show my students is who is the audience, who is the speaker, and what is the purpose for what they're doing. So we
Right.
would do the ethos, pathos, and logos of almost anything that we did because
so smart.
everybody has an agenda.
So then everybody,
has something.
regardless of student or not, should practice that.
Indeed.
Well, and I think this is important to discuss because it used to be check your source, check where the URL is coming from. But now that isn't even a safeguard because, let's talk, let's not talk about it, but I'll just bring it up quickly. The kid that was challenging the Native American man in Washington, D.C.
That was a confusing story.
That was a very confusing story because one news outlet jumped the gun and then everyone jumped on top of it. And while what this young man did was pretty despicable, there was a lot more to that story than we were being given. And then it came out later and there was, you had to do a lot of retraction and everything. And so it really, I think that was a really clear picture of just how even, trusted sources, quote unquote, CNN or even BBC, little
But
less than.
you said the word retraction. It's almost as if that's become a strategy. Is just throw it out there.
Yes, yeah,
You
update
get your
law,
initial
yeah.
reaction. Even if you do a retraction,
But
the first
that's
one is already
dangerous.
out.
It's a
It's
retraction.
extremely dangerous.
It's
yeah.
not sensationalized. The retraction is going to be at the very bottom of the article. It's
Yeah.
going to be hidden in
Exactly.
the fine print.
And
Nobody's
very
going to come on.
straightforward.
It's manipulation.
It's almost like it's better to ask for forgiveness than to ask for
Indeed.
permission. And that's what they're doing.
and there's danger in picture in like the interpretation
Yeah,
of
because
photos.
you can crop an image however you want. As a
Yeah.
photo editor, I mean, I can talk
So
all day about
you know.
this. And I used to write for an entertainment site online, and especially during like Comic-Cons and stuff, we had to jump on the news. I was the managing editor, and it was important because you wanted to be the first voice out there. And in so doing, you really, it's a minefield, really. And I would stress to my writers, make sure your facts are straight. I don't want to be having to come back and say, oops, got it wrong. And the irony is there was one story that we had to do a retraction on and I wrote it.
Oh, no.
And it was because Mark Hamill was, he likes to mess with fans a lot.
Oh, yeah, he does.
And it was...
You have to follow him on social media. He's
He's
amazing.
great.
He's hilarious.
And it was right before The Last Jedi was going to come out. And he kept teasing fans that he was going to give away some sort of plot line or something. And he phrased it a certain way and I fell for it and I reported on it. And then it turns out he was just messing with people. And I'm like, dang it.
man.
So, but it's true. You really have to be careful. And I think what I was surprised, I got into online writing because I had started a social media campaign that got picked up by online press. And I noticed like the first couple of stories that came out, it was really kind of, not only was it biased, but the facts weren't quite straight. And I had never been contacted by anybody. And I thought, I studied journalism in high school and I was on the paper and everything. And we really prided ourselves on being a really substantial paper. We wrote on really hard issues at the time. And so I felt like I had a little bit of experience with that. And we studied, ethics. And believe it or not, journalism has a code of ethics.
Yeah, it
There
does.
is actually one. Whether people learn it or not or adhere to it is a totally different story. But so I'm thinking, where is the code of ethics in this? So I contacted one of these writers and I said, you're writing about me and my campaign, but nobody has ever contacted me. And he said, well, we just need to get the story out really quick. And I'm like,
Oh my
well, you
gosh.
should really
So
get
it's
it
a wrong
out.
story.
It is. And the thing is now these large news outlets are picking up on these smaller writers, what they write. And so you'll get, a sensationalist headline that one of these, second tier, third tier outlets writes, and everyone jumps on it. And, your big, well-recognized outlets don't want to be left behind. So they jump on it too. And then it turns out it was all a lie.
So with your experience as a journalist, what advice would you give to listeners who are trying to search for the truth? I mean, how could you have us navigate that world of urgency. The stories have to come out, this and that. How do we do this?
You really got to pause and take a breath. I think you have
Everybody's
to
so
rely.
quick.
It is very quick. And I think you've really got to use your common sense. Do the math. Does this really make sense? Does this sound like something that would happen? If it's unbelievable, what I usually do is if I get like a breaking headline that comes out, I will sit there and I will go to different news outlets. Or if I'm online, if I'm online and one of my followers or somebody that I follow puts something out like, oh, this just this just happened. I'm like, really? So I'll go and I'll Google it. And if I don't see it on every news outlet that I recognize, I'm not going to fall for it, because there have been times where people have come with something saying, this and this happened. And I'm thinking, that sounds interesting. So I'm going to go Google that, and then come to find out it's only on these very biased, low grade, news outlet, almost like a blog, but passing themselves off as true news sources. And I'm like, okay, if these are the only URLs that are reporting on that, I'm going to go ahead and say that that's fake. I do love Snopes, by the way. Snopes is awesome. And my mother is also tends to see, now she can't listen to this because I'm going to talk bad about her. No, but she often comes to me with some news stories, and I'm like, you need to cross reference these, because
it's like you have to teach a whole new generation.
It's true.
There's too much information for them to decipher.
And I think
and it's quick.
And not to, jump on baby boomers, but I'm gonna. They weren't raised in this social media.
They don't know how to navigate it.
Even older Gen X, my brother is not super, he's not on social media at all. I don't even think he's ever seen Facebook, and he's really rejected it. And so you have the Gen X, kind of disconnect there. So you've got this older group, I would say, 50 and up, maybe even some 40s. And
Sorry,
Kara. And so they don't really know how to do this cross-referencing. They don't really know how to look out for it.
I'll speak for all Gen Xers. No, not really. But as a Gen X, at the very end of Gen X is what I am.
Yes.
We lived our generation trying to mimic what was taught to us by the boomers. We tried to mimic the boomers, and that was a complete failure.
For us. Yeah.
We learned later on in life.
They did not have it all together.
Once you hit 40, then you figured out, okay, I did all that wrong.
Yeah.
Let's move on from here.
I'm even worse because I was raised by the greatest generation.
Yeah, she was.
But I'm a Gen Xer, so I'm just all messed up.
That's why she doesn't like social media.
So let me ask you guys, as a librarian, when you are looking for information, what sources do you guys go to?
Google.
Google. Right? Yeah. Everybody goes to Google.
Quiet.
Do we
What's the right answer?
That's not a bad
say
thing.
something wrong.
But I think that this is a poignant time to show that Google's domain is .com.
Yep.
Which means that their motivation is commercial. Their motivation is money. So when we're looking at those sources and we're looking at those first hits on Google, we need to keep in mind that they're either the ones that the advertisers have paid the most money to get up there, or the ones that people are searching on more often to get the most hits to generate the revenue for Google.
Go to page 3 or 4 of your Google search.
And if it's still showing up, then go check it.
Right. And so as just media consumers or information consumers, these are things that we need to be savvy about in all things, not just our social media, but in all information that we're intaking.
Yeah,
I agree.
It's interesting. We're going to move on to our next talk. So in our mission statement, we say one meal at a time. And it's important, and I'm glad you brought up the owner of Hooters. I mean, he brought people in, fed them, and gave them drink. That was really cool. But it's food, it's meals that people sit around a table, and that's kind of like the glue of our society, bringing people together. When I had that conversation with with somebody, I'm not going to bring up who it was, but he voted for Trump, I voted for the other person. So we had this whole conversation. It was around a meal. We were both eating, and I think that kind of just brought us together. And that happens a lot here in El Paso. We are oh my God, if you come to El Paso, if you're not from El Paso and you're listening to this, there's just endless places that you can go eat our food that's culturally specific and not culturally specific.
And locally owned.
Yes. A lot of local restaurants, even restaurants that are both in Juarez and here in El Paso, and it's fantastic. But last week we did menudo. No, not last week. The last episode. I'm sorry, I'm banging on the table.
He's getting
I'm
passionate.
going to bang on the table and say a whole bunch more, many more times. But okay, so I grew up. Okay, Sunday mornings was our menudo breakfast, right? At my abuelita's, we'd go over there, and she made it from scratch, and she made her menudo, and we always had pan dulce afterwards. Okay, we already carved up with the bread with the menudo.
Translate for the white
Hey,
people.
but you know what? There's protein in there too.
Pan dulce is
Pan dulce is sweet bread.
okay.
Right? So there's a whole bunch of kind of sweet breads. So pan dulce is this overall term that describes a whole bunch of different sweet breads. And culturally, pan dulce was never really part of the indigenous cultures in this area. So if you're talking about specifically El Paso area, Southwest, and the Chihuahuan Desert area, the flour and all of that, it was not wheat. So that wasn't introduced until Europeans came over. And their flour was most likely like mesquite flour. So in the mesquite pods, in between the pod and the bean, there's this pulp, and it's sweet. You can make a sweet flour out of mesquite, and people are, it's kind of making a coming back.
Wow.
People are making pancakes out of mesquite flour, and it's very, very low on the glycemic index.
See,
Very
Europe just
low.
brought the
So
bad things.
hold on.
Yeah, well.
So it wasn't, and in Pueblo people used to use this type of flour, right? And maize, of course, the corn flour. But there some of the first notices of illness was diabetes, but that was after white processed flour was introduced to these pueblos. So it wasn't, so they kind of had it okay, but then it was really easy to make out of this processed flour as recent times, and then that's why I'm fat. So coming back to pan dulce, right? I did bring some. Everybody brought some pan dulce here today. It's in front of us. I'm sorry that if you're listening to this, you can't hear it, but you'll hear our reactions to it.
And I think we'll have pictures up too.
Yes, I'll post some
Definitely.
pictures. But right now, I have in front of me empanada.
Okay.
Empanada de piña. So this is a pineapple.
Turnover.
Turnover, I guess, is what you would call it. So an empanada is a derivative from the word empañar, to wrap, right? So you're going to wrap something. That's what you do is you wrap over it. And then it's not only pan dulce that they do with empanadas. They'll make actually meat empanadas.
So
things
what's
like
yours
that.
got in it?
Mine's pineapple.
Okay.
So mine's
His
pineapple.
favorite.
We also have some conchas here. If you want to look those up, conchas are like... seashells. So the term concha is a seashell, but they're shaped, and with the sugar, they're painted. The sugar makes the shape of the concha, of the seashell, right? And then we also have some marenitos, amaranos, like a pig. So these are little pigs, but it's like gingerbread, right?
Ginger
and
pigs.
then we have galletas. Galletas is just cookies in Spanish, but these cookies are usually very colorful.
Like watermelon.
Yes. So the one that
Yeah.
we brought today is it's painted. Well, and a food color painted, but it's food coloring, I guess, and it's
Yes.
just a watermelon deal.
Slice.
And
It's like a
usually
slice
it's like
of
a
watermelon.
triangle, and it's like 3 different colors together. I remember always getting that in like big old glass of milk. It's
So
one
I want to
fat-
hear what Ceci and Claudia have because they've been very quiet this episode. What kind of pastries do you have?
I believe I have the oreja, the ear. It looks like a puff pastry deal, flaky, sugary. What do you have, Ceci?
An oreja as well, and it's my favorite.
I'm enjoying this.
Why is it your
This
favorite?
delicious.
I like the flaky of it, the flaky texture and the puff pastry. Yeah,
Oh my God!
but this one actually, the oreja
Go with
comes
the
from.
empanada. Go with the empanada.
Empanada's pretty
Wait,
good.
I have something to say,
Yes,
George.
go ahead. I can't hold my
Let
reaction.
the woman talk.
The oreja comes actually. It's this type of pastry comes from France. So and the oreja and another one that Candy brought that looks very similar to the oreja, but it's in round shape, is called a palmera, and it's larger in size as well. And but it's the same texture. I like it. It's good.
So the palmera is the shape of a palm.
Okay.
Palm leaf.
leaf.
Now, it's hard to if you're going to talk about El Paso, one of the most, and I'm clearing my mouth here, trying to swallow the pineapple. The bakeries here in town, there's one really popular one that from the
Bowie Bakery.
The Bowie Bakery, right?
Yeah.
So initially, this guy owned it, and he owned it for a while. And then in 1971, this other person, I don't remember everybody's names, but they bought it and made it really, really famous. Everybody always, if you came to town, you went to the Bowie Bakery. That's where you got all your pan dulce. So much so, and I don't know when he visited Bowie Bakery. And this is in the Segundo Barrio. It's the second ward down in by our downtown El Paso. It's where the original Bowie Bakery is. There's multiple ones now, but that's where the original one is. And when that guy passed away, actually, George W. Bush, he actually sent a letter to the family when he passed away. So it was talked about. It wasn't in the news or anything that President Bush visited the Bowie Bakery, but at some point he had an interaction with that family and the bakery. But he actually sent them a letter. Wow. You know, they're giving his condolences and everything. And when he was governor, people don't realize. I of course never agreed with him politically.
I'm gonna try it.
But him and his wife were very involved Texas and El Paso, believe it or not. His wife actually came down and she wanted to tour Waco Tanks.
She has family here, I think.
She does?
They're from Midland, but I do believe she has extended family here. Oh. But, you know, you're absolutely right, because that was one of my points that I really hooked on. I hate to, well, do I hate to say it? I don't know. I don't really, I regret nothing. I voted for President Bush both times. And
she used to be a Republican.
I did. And then I voted for Obama. I mean, we could have a whole nother episode on, you know, how the Republican Party has changed to the point that now I'm like, Beto O'Rourke, you know. But George Bush was really good about including El Paso in Texas politics, which El Paso, once again, isolated. Most of Texas doesn't really care. We
felt like a stepchild of Texas.
We did. And he was one of the few governors that really included us because, you know, would Abbott include us? You know, had the shooting not happened? I don't think so. You know, we've never been so popular. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Does he really even still? So,
so there's I know we're talking about pan dulce, but there's politics in that, you know, in the food. But it was a coming together, and it was a good thing that brought El Paso didn't vote for George W. Bush.
No.
For governor.
I was in Seattle and I voted for President Bush. Can you imagine?
But yet he was involved. He had this connection with our city as governor, and then with even president, even during the time. I mean, with his wife, and you know, and a lot of it had to do with some of the food, and I was amazed when I found out that he had this connection with the Bowie Bakery family.
His wife was librarian, by the way.
That's true.
Yeah.
Oh, also there's another bakery. It's called El Paso's Bakery, but they had on their website, actually, you can go, and I love the way they describe the way they make their pan dulce. And let me give you read a little quote from this. "We believe that the true measure of pan dulce is translated by the passion and love the artisan panaderos, the bakers, have for their skill." I mean, they go on, but that just is a quote from their describing of how they make their passion, and I'm just fascinated by the glue that meals are, and then just something as simple as sweetbread, pan dulce, bringing people together, and even with differences, you can find compromise in that.
Well, I think that sharing a meal is something so unique because you have stuff in your mouth and you can listen to other people and be quiet for just a little bit.
That's a good point.
But also, like, I mean, it brings not just our culture together, but cultures throughout the world, the breaking of bread, the sharing a meal. And Claudia is kind of like our foodie of the group. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so why do you think that within our mission statement for Voices Strong that it is so important to include this, like, breaking of bread throughout our episodes? I know it's a podcast, but we'll include pictures and hopefully one day video as well. But why is this such an important part to culture, food?
Well, I guess it was mentioned in the previous podcast and what George was saying earlier. I mean, even just our group from college. I remember one of the first times we all met, our exposure photo club was at a Mexican restaurant. And I think that's when we all, and I remember we all brought prints of our photos and.
Was it La Malinche?
Maybe La Malinche? No. It was something called the Cortés.
Oh my God.
El
Rincón de Cortés. Thank you.
Now it's like an Mediterranean restaurant, I think. Istanbul now, which I still haven't been to. I need to go. But but everybody on the west side, they get everything. The Indian, there's new Indian restaurants that, oh my God,
Exactly.
I've been wanting to check out, and a noodles and dumplings place. And
It's amazing.
I know. We were supposed to go for my husband's birthday, and then it just got late, and we had to catch a movie. But
everybody's smiling at these restaurants and these noodles and
I mean, I'm looking forward to that part when we go out to the restaurants as well, and
look at just within ourselves, our reaction to food.
We get happy.
To going and I'm used to that growing up here in El Paso. Is like and people, I don't know if I brought this up before, people say, well, kids are very well connected but isolated because they just are on their phones.
Right.
The culture here in El Paso, kids are on their phone, yes, and they're very connected to the world and all of that. But they are always getting together. I see my students and I see kids, hey, let's go get something to eat. Let's go over here. Let's go to Whataburger. They are together. They are physically in front of each other. They're not as isolated as people think.
Because what happens when you eat is you also share conversation.
Yeah. For sure.
One thing, my daughter right now is 16 years old. She's a junior at Eastwood and has this wonderful group of friends. I love her friends. I've kind of adopted them. And every Thanksgiving, what they've started to do is they have their own little Thanksgiving. Like we went and bought some Popeye's chicken, and they'll meet at a friend's house and they'll have a little party and they'll eat. And it goes well beyond just going out to lunch, during the school days. But at the beginning of the year, the first day and last day, they'll have a breakfast. They'll wake up crack of dawn, and guess who gets to drive her? And they'll have this breakfast and they'll make food for each other. And I'm so impressed, but we never did that in high school and make food for my friends.
I know, we didn't do it today.
I'm glad you brought that up. Growing up here in El Paso, you had multiple Thanksgivings.
Yeah.
Even with your friend, because your friend came over to your families, you ate there, and then you go over to their family, then you ate there, and this, you weren't related.
You have your abuelita, and you take your friends to your abuelita's house.
Right.
So.
And then you had your friends and you did it. We did do that one time.
Multiple Christmas, even just any day. I had dinner at my house, whatever. I'm going to go hang out with my friend, go to his house, and his mom right away. Oh, you want some taquitos? They're making taquitos. Oh, God, they're so good. I just ate, but I'm going to eat again.
So this is coming from one of the white people in the group. So I know that there's also like this ritual and routine and tradition around the preparation of certain meals, like teaching how to make tamales, right?
Tortillas.
Exactly. And so I've never done that, but I do know, within my culture, there's different traditions. But I know that there's something beautiful in that tradition that is very important about the ritual of it, whether it's spending time with the younger generation and teaching them that. It's like a bonding thing.
Right. And you don't know that it's a ritual. Or, it's not portrayed as that. It's just something you do. So the kitchen is, even you have a whole living room in the other room, but everybody's in this tiny little kitchen in the preparation. The meal's not even ready yet. And you're in there and you're talking and you're talking you're talking whatever it is that you're talking about. And then, and of course, chismosos, right?
Oh,
yeah, a lot of that. But and at the same time, it is ritualistic, and it's passing the
torch.
Yeah, passing the torch to the other generations.
And see, I feel bad that we're kind of losing that too with the younger. Even myself included. And then now my children, I don't know how to make menudo. I don't know. Maybe my friend says he does, so I admire her for that. How to make certain dishes that her mom makes, like truly Mexican. I know. I always if I throw it in out there to my mom, it's an excuse to see my family because we hardly see each other. You know, we don't check up on each other all that often. We're close, but we give each other our space. But then if she says, oh, well, I'm going to make menudo tonight, so come tomorrow morning, I'll be ready. Oh. And I'm like, okay, I'm there. I've been craving it. Yay. You know, instead of having to buy it at the bakery or whatever. It's nothing compares to when your mother or your grandmother makes it. Now it's my mom.
Yeah.
Because her mom.
That brings you together.
And then it's excuse to see my sisters and then catch up with everybody. It's been a month or two, you know, and but I do feel bad, like, oh my God, I don't know how to make these dishes. I need to learn. And now I see that there's a lady, and I tag my mom, her sister, and my other aunt that lives in Minnesota who's has taken those dishes out there to the white people in Minnesota. She's from Durango. It's awesome. And there's a lady on YouTube from, I guess, some Rancho Pueblo that she has a YouTube channel now, Angela. She came out on the news and my aunts, oh yeah, we saw her on the news the other day that she has her YouTube channel teaching her traditional dishes and it's called De Mi Rancho a tu casa o a tu, you know. So I'm like, that's a really great idea. I'm like, Mom, Aunt, Tia, you guys need to do this because maybe that's how we're going to pass on what you know and maybe we can be out there documenting because I do have to
give a shout out to my beautiful wife over here.
Because she does know how to make all that.
She just learned how to make elotes. So elotes en vaso, that's corn in a cup, right? So it's this white favorite corn and with a cheese and a chile and tajin. And we had a fundraiser for one of the clubs I do at my school. And we sold out.
Oh, yeah.
And it was so good. She made it specifically how I remember having the first time I ever had elotes was over in Juarez when I was a kid.
With the white corn.
It was the white corn.
Not the can yellow that they try to sell.
No, it's the white corn. And props to her because she pulled it off. And some of the people that work here that grew up with all that and know the recipe and all that, she's spot on.
Made them nostalgic.
Oh my God! Well, you should make that for them because it was so good.
Next episode. And next episode sponsored by Billy Bakery.
Right? He can give us tortas. We'll talk about tortas.
But the idea of storytelling, right? Because I hear what we're talking about with food and culture and tradition and everything. And honestly, what we're doing ostensibly is telling stories through food, telling stories through that culture and that bringing together. And for me, eating in all of these different restaurants around El Paso, like Japanese and Korean and Hawaiian and, you know, Mexican and Italian. Yeah, sure. We've got Italian restaurants here too, you know, but all of these really tells our story as a people that we do have so many restaurants with so much diversity and people do travel here from different places around the world to eat our cuisine because it is that blending and that fusion of food here that is so unique to who we are as El Pasoans.
Oh, well said. Yeah.
One thing I was talking about growing up and learning how to cook and everything. My mother's family, both on her father's and mother's side, a few generations back, did come from Mexico, and that's where my Latina blood comes from. The rest of it, I took a DNA test, and I am horrifically British. I'm like 80%. You know, it was really shocking how English and Irish I am. But there is a little bit of the Latina in there, and
you do have the Irish freckles a little bit.
A little bit. My daughters do too. But one thing is with my grandmother, especially, she grew up in a very rural area of Arizona. And so she was the only daughter among 6 brothers. And so she was raised solely for one purpose, and that was to get married and have children, you know. And her father wouldn't let her go past 8th grade. And her father was from Wisconsin, you know, and while her mother was from the Sonora area. And but she learned how to make, you know, tortillas and empanadas. She never made menudo, though, I don't think. I mean, maybe she did when I was little. I don't really remember, but she made calabacitas.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, did I get that word right? Those were really good, you know, but to me, I didn't have really names on them, but like her tortillas were so, I mean, I have not found their parallel on this planet yet.
There's nothing better than a fresh tortilla, just right off the
iron the smell.
Fresh like that. If you want to put a little bit of butter, go right ahead, but just straight up fresh like that is...
You know, and just watching her work, I mean, just doing the dough,
Yeah.
But my point is when my grandparents raised their children here in El Paso at that time was very, obviously it's always had a huge Latino culture because, of where it is. However, there was a very strong Caucasian,
influence.
Yeah, there was a strong, American, Anglo-American influence and population here. In fact, my mother went to Isleta, and it was 90% white. There was a time, and so it was very important for them to not
Americanize.
Yeah, they had to Anglicize it or Americanize everything. They were not taught Spanish. They were not. That's why I don't speak Spanish, and so people upon sight assume, some don't, that I'm Hispanic. And, I've been challenged, why don't you know Spanish? And I'm like, I wasn't raised with it really. My grandparents still spoke it, but they did not pass it on to their children. So they kind of picked it up, kind of just being in the area, and then less so with my generation. And so my grandmother also did not really pass along the cooking. None of my aunts know how to do the tortillas. None of them know how to do the empanadas. In fact, my grandmother passed along, before she passed away, the recipe to my aunt's husband, who's from from Michigan. And he's this really tall, like Norwegian looking guy, and he knows how to make the tortillas. And so I need to really get the recipe from him. And so I've been trying to bring back a lot of her recipes and a lot of her cooking. I've also been kind of horrible in that I have not passed this along to my children, but
it's never too late.
It's never too late, and they're interested. So I really want to do that, but I think it's kind of sad, really, that in trying to assimilate to American culture. And I doubt my grandmother was alone in this, is, to give up that culture, right. And the beauty of it. And to the point where it's almost like my mother and my aunts and uncles denied that part of their future because it was seen as lesser. And it was portrayed as being weak and, undesirable.
And we have to be very cognizant not to let this happen again, because we are literally at a tipping point in El Paso where people listening to their social media and listening to the backlash against the Hispanic culture, try again to suppress that and Americanize again. So we need to keep aware of that.
Yes, most definitely. You were saying that you weren't sure if your grandmother was alone in that. She wasn't. I'm actually taking a sociolinguistics class at UTEP this semester, and it's proven that within the third generation, all the language is lost. The mother tongue is lost. And you're saying also the recipes and the cooking. Well, yes, of course, that would be lost as well. Right. But we were doing a study, and El Paso is a very unique situation, whereas most third generations still can speak and understand the majority of the mother tongue. They may not be as fluent as their grandparents. Right. But whereas if you go to the north or east, third generation, they don't even understand it. Yeah. And so El Paso is a very unique place that I know you said that you don't speak it, but the majority of third generations here in El Paso do still have some of that. And with the food is
comes with it.
And I've had to, my introduction to some really, native Mexican foods and everything has been through friends and coworkers and stuff. Like my one of my coworkers, she's such a mother, she's very maternal, and so she's always bringing pan dulce. And I don't like flan, I've discovered.
I don't either. The texture,
whatever.
But other stuff, I'm like, oh, that's really good.
So you don't like creme brulee either?
No.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I'm not real big on the creme brulee.
Jello pudding, no.
Oh, you don't like that?
That's okay. We'll forgive you.
So maybe that's part of our mission as well, is that to promote storytelling so that is not lost, and to promote through food the cultural aspect, because so much of culture is tied to food. And so I think moving forward, we're hoping that it's not just Mexican culture, but it's also Vietnamese culture in our city. It's the German culture in our city, and so showcasing those different things. I think it'd be cool if on our website, every time we have a podcast, we put up a recipe for what we talked about.
That's a really good idea.
Awesome idea.
I would love that.
I would love that too.
Because I I
And
want
then
to
you
learn
make
how
your
to
own and
try
bring
it. Yeah.
Show and tell.
We know, and there's
So
also
what I'm hearing is that you're
No.
going to make a bunch and you're going to bring the next time we have.
That's
All right.
going to be like, nailed
Sounds like a
it.
deal.
It's going to be horrible.
So I'm never going to
See
be
how bad it
invited
comes
back
out.
since I will not
We
cook.
should put up a, would you help find a recipe?
Yeah, we'll
Yes,
put it up
definitely.
there. Yeah.
Definitely.
What's
Yeah.
interesting though is there are other subsets here, subcultures here. In fact, my ex-husband is half Syrian, and there's a huge Syrian / Lebanese culture here.
it's- we're going to talk about that on our next one because we know people down in Fabens that have ranches,
Okay.
and during certain
Religious ceremonies.
holidays, yeah, they
religious
go
holidays.
down there and buy goats and
Goats.
stuff like that.
Oh,
So
interesting.
And he raises them the way that they need to be raised for.
Oh yeah.
yeah, it's got to match. But you know what? Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming today.
Absolutely.
That was fantastic. That was a good conversation. I
We
could talk about this stuff all
appreciate
day
it.
long.
I know, right?
If you're going to have me talk about El Paso, you better, pack a lunch because I'm going to be talking for a long time. Any last words? Anybody want to say something before we sign off?
Oh, we just appreciate you coming here, but also I hope that you let us know when your podcast launches so that we can help promote it.
Awesome.
For
And
sure.
Yeah,
We
likewise.
are honored to be here. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for coming.
El Paso strong.
El Paso strong. And we do have quite a bit of pan dulce left, so everybody's got to finish it before they leave. Joking. It's a lot. But it's a good thing we brought our kids are right outside, so they're probably going to be enjoying that. But thank you guys. Thank you for joining Voices Strong El Paso. We'll see you guys on the next one. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.